Hi everyone, I know this is not my usual HD YouTube podcast studio or my backyard fence, but I wanted to make a quick video because I have been arguing on the internet all morning about gun control, which is a complete waste of time, but you know how it is when, someone on the internet is wrong and we have to tell them that they're wrong and try to change their opinions, even though their opinions will never get changed, so it is a waste of time, and then everyone ends up angry and frustrated and making ranting YouTube videos like this. Hooray! So one of the things coming up in this gun control argument that always seems to come up when gun control is mentioned is the idea of the gun show loophole, which doesn't actually exist. So this whole gun show loophole is the idea that gun shows and the internet are completely unregulated, and that someone who is quote-unquote engaged in the business of selling firearms at gun shows is somehow not subject to federal law, even though federal law already defines someone who is a dealer in firearms or engaged in the business of selling firearms and has been doing that since 1938. That is someone who is called a federal firearms licensee, or FFL. And there is no law, no language in any law or statutes that gives any sort of protection or exemption to internet or gun show sales. It's not out there. You can look for it. It doesn't exist. I mean, just take the internet, for example. It is actually illegal to ship guns across state lines to anyone who isn't an FFL or federal firearms licensee. And all FFLs are required to do background checks before they sell a firearm. So this whole, universal background check thing that, anti-gunners say doesn't exist, it actually exists. It is in place. If you are legally buying a firearm from an FFL, you have to go through a background check in the National Background Check System. And this doesn't take just like 5 minutes or 7 minutes or whatever it is that a lot of these news articles like to say. If it's taking only 5 minutes, I would be concerned that something is probably going wrong or that the reporters are just lying, frankly. The only thing that isn't regulated on the federal level is the occasional private transfers between individuals in the same state. And while that's not federally regulated, most states do regulate that themselves. So most states do already have laws in place for private sales, whether they are happening between, two people at a gun show or two people in someone's living room or whatever it is. There are laws in place in most cases. Consider this. It actually costs money to get a table or a booth at a gun show. I don't really think many people are going to be like, hey, yeah, I'm going to pay money for this booth at a gun show and then totally break the law and illegally sell firearms to random people at this place where I paid to have my business. That just doesn't make sense. I mean, if you put it that way, it sounds pretty stupid, doesn't it? The National Institute of Justice has done a study on this, okay, and they've concluded that only 2% of guns used in crimes were actually bought at a gun show. 2%. That's like this big. That's really tiny. 2%, okay? And only 0.7% of state and federal inmates at the jails that they studied got guns from a gun show. So that's even smaller than this. That's like this big, okay? That's like teeny tiny. And while we're talking about these statistics that people throw out, what about this idea that between 25 to 50% of vendors at gun shows are unlicensed dealers? Okay, certainly that can be true if we are counting things like, people selling accessories like holsters or t-shirts or food vendors, or, sometimes there's that random guy that's selling fudge that's kind of old and stale and might not actually be qualified as food. That guy would probably be considered an unlicensed dealer. Here's another one that everyone's heard from Obama and Feinstein and all those other anti-gun politicians, is the idea that 40% of firearms are bought without a background check. Now, that 40% statistic does actually come from somewhere. It comes from a survey that was done by the Justice Department in 1997. But the 40% number is kind of skewed. This 40% includes 29% of people who got their firearms from family or friends. Okay, so this is, a friend or family member who gave it to them as a gift, or had their firearms transferred to this person when they passed away, which is perfectly legal. So if you subtract that, then that means only 11% of this 40% got their firearms from unfamiliar people, and 4% got these at a gun show, and another 4% said other. So of this 40%, okay, there was 29 that got them from a friend or family member, and 4% that got it from a gun show. So again, we're looking at 4%. 4% out of all the gun owners in the country. Now, keep in mind that firearms are the only item that requires FBI permission to purchase. The only thing. And if people aren't following the laws that are already in place, I don't know if there's really much we can do about that. More laws aren't the answer. Even if we look at Obama's executive orders in January of 2016, where he supposedly closed the gun show loophole and, put all these other things into place to, prevent gun crime, all he really did was put out a 15-page brochure with relevant laws and guidelines. Nothing actually changed. They just took the definitions that the ATF already had in place and reprinted them on pretty glossy paper for people. That's all that did. None of these executive orders included new laws to close the gun show loophole or any other smaller loopholes within the supposed gun show loophole, because the gun show loophole doesn't exist. There are already laws in place to prevent things like what the gun show loophole supposedly allows. That is the gun show loophole, or the myth of the gun show loophole, in however long it took me to make this video that I just ranted out. So, right, okay. Still kind of frustrated, but I guess that's it.